So I would say I'm a pretty relaxed and easygoing person, but I would also describe myself as being fairly conflict avoidant. And I think these two traits are commonly found paired together. You don't really see chill people initiating conflict that often, or getting into heated discussions or arguments. If anything, the chill people are usually the ones to de-escalate these situations, sometimes at their own expense. And I get it. Being in a conflict is very uncomfortable. I really don't like arguing with people or being challenged on something. I also don't like having to say or do things that other people may not like or appreciate. So sometimes I'll accept something that wasn't really the way I wanted it to be, rather than fighting or arguing for it, so as not to be in conflict. Oh, my burger came with a salad even though I wanted fries? That's fine, I'll just eat this. Or if someone stops me on the street and tries to get me to donate to a cause that I don't want to donate to, I will politely let them finish their whole spiel before saying no thanks, rather than just ignoring them or cutting them off early. Or sometimes I'll pretend that I'm on the phone just so I can avoid that conversation altogether. Or I might be quick to apologize for something even if it wasn't really my fault. I'm not saying I do these things all the time, but I think that as an easygoing and conflict avoidant person, I'm a lot more flexible than most people with what I'll tolerate or accept. Obviously though, there are times where things are not tolerable or acceptable. Even if you're the most conflict avoidant person in the world, you will eventually find yourself in a situation where you can't avoid it. You need to stand up for yourself in order to prevent someone from taking advantage of you or the situation that you're in. And as a conflict avoidant person, this is very difficult to do. It's very unfamiliar territory. I usually don't even know what to say or do. Let's say you're interacting with someone who appears to be purposefully hostile. How am I supposed to resolve this situation? I'll tell you what's probably not the best idea, and that's engaging with them in the way that they're engaging with you. If you do that, not only are you stooping to their level, but you're playing into their game, and they are probably much better at it than you are. For example, I used to play soccer. One time, we were playing against a team with a guy who just wouldn't shut up. One of those guys. He was constantly complaining about things to the ref, but he was also trash-talking all of our players. And he was pretty good, so he was able to back it up with his play. But it created a very competitive and negative atmosphere for the entire game. And I mean, this happens a lot in sports. It's part of the competition and it's part of the game. And as an easygoing conflict avoidant person, I always hate it. Anyway, he was trash-talking me too. And usually in these cases, I just laugh it off and play the game. But after a while, I kind of just got fed up with him. It got me riled up to the point where I started trash-talking him back. And as soon as I started, I immediately regretted it. I rarely ever trash talk, so I'm not very good at it. Whereas this guy did it all the time, so he was very comfortable with it. As soon as I engaged, I felt out of my depth. I didn't know what I was doing, and I couldn't think of anything to say after the first thing I said. And it seemed like he took it to another level, a level that I didn't want to go to, nor knew how to get to. So eventually I just stopped and focused on the game that we eventually won, which was the thing that finally shut him up. So sometimes you can successfully navigate a conflict by letting your actions do the talking. You can win the game, or you can let your work speak for itself, but other times you won't be able to do this. You'll need to stand your ground during a conflict. I think this is best done through setting a personal boundary. If you aren't familiar with personal boundaries or just need a refresher, I like to think about them in terms of being the point or line where something goes from being okay to not okay. If you feel weird or uncomfortable about what someone is doing, their behavior is likely getting close to crossing, or maybe has already crossed one of your boundaries. For me, as an easygoing conflict avoidant person, I do not always maintain firm boundaries. There have been lots of times where I haven't been 100% okay with someone's behavior, but rather than standing my ground, I usually pull my own boundary back a bit. And I may keep doing this if they keep crossing it. I'll let it go and excuse their behavior at the expense of my own boundaries. I find I do this more, especially if it's someone that I know, trust, or respect. It's easy to maintain your boundaries with some random person being a jerk at the gas station. It's much more difficult to do this with a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a boss who may be crossing the line. But this video is about standing up for yourself when you're conflict avoidant. The likely scenario here is that someone has already crossed your boundary, maybe more than once. So what are you supposed to do now? I think there are three main parts to this. 1, realizing that you need to set a boundary for yourself. 2, communicating that boundary to the other person. And 3, enforcing that boundary if it's crossed, or crossed a second time after you've already communicated it. It's not always easy to realize that you need to set a boundary for yourself. You might keep making excuses like I do sometimes, brushing it off and pretending like everything is fine. I think the key part is coming to understand that you, like everyone, deserve to be treated with respect. If you're not feeling okay about someone's behavior and it's not stopping, maybe it's time to set a boundary. Stop excusing their behavior. I am I'm not okay with what you did or what you are doing. And once you've set a boundary for yourself, it's equally as important to communicate it. This can sometimes be the hardest and scariest part, especially if you're conflict avoidant. Doing this means actively stepping into the conflict. You don't know how they're going to react. You might be starting a fight, but also, this doesn't always have to be a big show. I think most people think about standing up for yourself as suddenly going from passive and meek to bold and assertive in the moment. And that's not the only way to communicate your boundary. You can do this in a way that's respectful and not argumentative. You can even do this after the interaction is over. You can say something like, "Hey, can I talk to you? I didn't really appreciate what you were saying earlier, and I'm going to ask you not to do it again." This is a great and respectful way to stand up for yourself. You're clearly communicating what you are and are not okay with. And you're keeping it classy by not starting a fight in public. And sometimes people don't even know that they've crossed a line. If they're a good person, like most people are, they'll apologize right away and be glad that you told them. They'll appreciate that you communicated your boundary to them, and now they'll know to avoid going back there. But the key thing here is that you communicate it. And sometimes people don't respect the boundary that you've communicated to them. They may be willing to cross it again. And in this case, you need to be ready to enforce that boundary. And I think this is the biggest part of standing up for yourself. You can't control other people's behavior, but you can control how you react and respond. And if you'll continue to tolerate and accept that behavior. I think people often think about enforcing boundaries or standing up for yourself in terms of throwing someone out of your personal space. And this is usually true in the movies. The good guy eventually fights the bad guy who's trying to intimidate him. And after he wins, the bad guy slinks off, or is unconscious, or is dead. But this isn't always the case in real life. You can't fight everyone who refuses to respect your boundaries. You may not always have the power to deliver divine righteousness on their miserable existence. Sometimes the best way to stand up for yourself and no longer tolerate that behavior is just to leave. Exit the interaction, walk away. Maybe you quit that job with the toxic boss. Maybe you do not allow this person to be part of your life anymore. Removing yourself from the situation means that they can't cross your boundary anymore. And that sounds like a pretty good way to enforce it if you're conflict avoidant like I am. So at the end of the day, I hope you do not find yourself in these situations very often. But if you do, I hope you'll realize sooner than later that you need to set a boundary for yourself. I hope you'll then communicate and be ready to enforce that boundary if necessary. Always remember that you deserve to be treated with respect. And I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Anyway, that's it for today. If this resonated with you or you found this insightful, your thumbs up is appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos on personal development and self-improvement. And let me know in the comments about a time you stood up for yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.